Welcome, everybody. It's Larry Johnson, your host on Eight Principles, the founder of the Eight Principles, but Eight Principles Voices, I guess I should say, the podcast. And I have a delightful guest for you today. You're going to really like this guy, Doug Crowe, or is it Crowe, Doug?
It doesn't really matter, but Crow is probably the one I use the most.
All right, Doug Crowe.
Couple times I've been called Crowy, but that's usually in Asia. So yeah, Crow's good.
Yeah, like the actor, right?
That's right. My cousin Russell. That's right.
All right, there you go. So anyway, and Doug is one of those very bright young men that likes to tell others how they can write books more effectively and communicate more effectively. And he's, as you can see from the bookshelf in the back. And by the way, that is not a screen. That's the real deal behind him.
Yeah.
He's pretty damn good at it. It would be my guess. So I'm just going to let him get into it because what I want to talk about today is that shop worn thing called nonprofit storytelling. Okay. And it's going to be, let's just say it's not going to be the story you heard. Let's put it that way. So, right. Doug, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. I appreciate the compliments. I don't know about young, but I give a lot of credit to my team for helping us ghostwrite, publish, and produce these books we've done for the past 14 years. That's not just me. I got great people behind me.
The mark of a leader, Doug, knowing that without the team, he could never do it.
That's right.
And by the way, the word young is a relative term.
A
relative term. So
one of my friends I saw on his bookshelf when I was visiting him out in LA a few months ago. It's what is it? 100 is the new 30. A longevity book. I'm like, okay, we'll see how that goes. I hope so. Be nice.
That's really pushing it out there.
Yeah, right.
So you have a business where you assist writers in either producing a book on their own, and you manage that entire process, I guess, all the way from inception to publication, editing, production, publication, distribution. But then you also have the ability to offer ghost writing services.
Now, yeah, the bulk of our business is actually ghostwriting and development for CEOs and founders. That's our sweet spot.
Okay.
Most of them, they can write, but most of them don't have the time to do it. And even if they did, there's so much, as you know, going into proper storytelling that it takes a lot of headspace to craft a good book that is useful and informative.
So do you do biographical work?
We've done a few biographies. Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Now I'm reading a book right now. I don't know if you've seen it or heard of it. Well, the guy is fascinating. Musab Hassan Youssef, the guy that was the son of Hamas and also an informant for Shin Ben, and now he's in the United States. This, as you see, is ghost written. There's the name right underneath it. And I'll be honest with you, I've never been a big fan of ghost written books, generally because there's sort of an authenticity element that isn't quite there. It's not like they're fabricating anything. That's not what it is. It's just that the voice of the person doesn't seem to quite come through. This one, it's pretty good. It's written pretty well. I'm about halfway through, but I can tell there are places of it that's a little bit discontinuous. And I'm not sure whether that's the subject, meaning the individual, or whether it's the man who's writing for the individual. Tell us a little bit about the ghostwriting process and how that works.
Yeah, you make a good point about capturing a person's voice and style. That's one of the things we struggled with the first few years in our company, and we've definitely nailed the process down to where I can actually have our ghostwriters sound just like our clients, if not better. And it goes to the idea of not just storytelling, but make it, using proper storytelling structure to make it compelling. And you mentioned that, maybe a little bit disjointed in the way this was written. That may or may not be a function of ghostwriting. It might be more a function of developmental editing, which is also a key part. If you're going to write your own book, you cannot do it without a really good editor. And if you do have a ghostwriter, we still use an editor, because the person who writes isn't always the person who looks at the structure of how a thing should flow. So the process we use is very specific. We have a journalist, we have a researcher, a ghostwriter, development editor, and a proofer, and a layout artist. So there's about 6 functions going on there to craft a book that is compelling, useful, and if we're lucky, entertaining. And when it comes to ghostwriting, it's an art. There's a little bit of science to it, but it's mostly art. And I must have interviewed over 1,000 different writers in my days, and we've got a core team now that's full-time on staff that knows how to emulate a person's voice and make it compelling, because especially when the people are, they're speakers, right? They're talking to their board, their investors, whatnot. It's important to them to be good communicators, but we don't speak the way we read, we don't write the way we listen. So there's a little bit of a bridge you have to do there to make it work. I often say that, Hollywood spends, $100 million to hold our attention for 2 hours with visuals and actors, and you're expecting to hold someone's attention for 6 hours with just your words. So all you've got is storytelling. There's nothing else there. There's no, Ben Affleck or Tom Cruise to back you up in this story. You got to be able to really communicate it in an effective manner.
So let's say I'm an author.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I am an author, but let's say I want to come to you and I want to write a book, and and you know that I want it ghostwritten. Now,
Mm-hmm.
does the ghostwriter who's assigned I'd like to know that process of how that assignment takes place, but also would that individual call me, get to know me, just read my stuff? Well, what would be the process to begin that understanding of who I am?
We generally break up the journalist and the ghostwriter, two separate functions. When I first started out, our volume was low enough that the journalist was the ghostwriter. But now with the scaling operation, we've got specific journalists. And there's a really important point here I got to make, because people who sit and write their own book, it's fine, but I guarantee you they're skipping things. They're filtering their experiences, what they think the reader wants to know. And a good journalist always asks the right questions. Hey, where were you when you said that? Who was in the room? Why did you do that? And those are always the question that the reader wants to know, that sometimes a person who's writing their own book might gloss over or avoid for any number of reasons. So our journalists have really good probative skills. They find out exactly what's going on, why a person is doing something, how it reflected in their life, etc. And the ghostwriter is able to take all those stories and their stream of consciousness and formulate it into a manuscript.
I'm reflecting back on my first experience at writing the book, The Eight Principles. Yeah. All right. Mm-hmm. And I had a book coach, which now I think assumed the role you just talked about, the journalistic role. Mm-hmm. I did write it myself, mm-hmm. But there were 3 editors involved at one point. And of course, they understood things about books and the way they're structured and the way you communicate in a book that I did not understand. Yeah. One of the things two of the things I remember, and I say this in quite honesty. First of all, I tend to write at too high a vocabulary level for most people. Yeah. And I need to, and they have to, Larry, dumb it down, dumb it down, dumb it down. Another word. The other thing I learned was, I think more academically, and so if you're going to communicate in a engaging way, you have to lead in with something that's going to capture people's attention within the first couple of pages.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you see, and here I am laying out a treatise, and I don't get to the main subject till 20 pages in. Everyone, next. All right. Yeah. So I've gone through that kind of education, and the process took a year. Yep. Get this done. And I learned about doing that. And the other thing I wanted to tell you is that although I'm not doing it today, I trained myself, Doug, that when I write as I speak.
That's fine. Yeah.
And it took me about 3 or 4 or 5 years to really focus on that. So now when I do a training video, I don't speak real well extemporaneously. I need to have a script. So I could share I'm actually reading a teleprompter, and people will tell you I would have never known that. You can't see your eyes moving or anything else. It's because I feel like I'm conversing with the person I'm speaking to. And if you've read any of my, blogs, whatever, incidental articles, I write the same way, very short, pithy kind of sentences and stuff, and I'm communicating. But as you know, that takes a lot of effort and a lot of work. And it's a training process. And if a person is, say, an active executive or line manager that they're spending all this time running their company, there isn't a lot of time left over for anything else. Now, I've had the blessing, I have a CEO that does those things for me. How nice. And I can be more creative. And that's, by the way, that's my sweet spot. My sweet spot is not running the company. Okay, I'll be with you. So let's go back to what you talked about, writing and communicating in the voice and learning who the voice is. Now, let's take a little sidestep and let's look into the world of philanthropy for a minute. I firmly believe, and the numbers demonstrated, I'm not just blowing smoke, that the most effective, meaning the most money over the longest period of time, way of raising money is through building a relationship with a potential investor.
Absolutely spot on. That's true for everything.
Yes, it is. And yet, unfortunately, a lot of my fundraising brothers and sisters and in the community, they think it's all about convincing you how wonderful they are.
Right.
And pressing that hard, and maybe, throwing a little guilt in there in the process. Well, if you don't do this, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
well,
the puppies will die.
Now, and that works to a degree. It's not like it's not ineffective, but it's getting less effective. And then, especially at certain levels, I don't know what you know about philanthropy, but 80% of the funds that are raised come from 20% of the sources.
Yeah.
Pareto principle. I mean, that operates everywhere. 80% of the 80% of the leadership comes from 20% of the people. And it's the same thing. So with that distribution in mind, with that approach that I just described, you're really bottom feeding is what you're doing. You're churning at the lowest possible levels. And as a result of that, you're having trouble scale. And if you don't do it well, you're having trouble renewing. You may know this. You want to guess what the 1-year renewal rate is for donors? For instance, if I made a gift to your nonprofit this year for the first time, what are the odds or percentage that next year I would give another gift of any size?
I bet it's less than the Pareto's principle. I'm guessing less than 20%.
Well, it's about 39%.
Okay, that's better than I thought. Okay.
But when you consider that the consumer products vertical has a customer renewal rate of 95%, you're really underwater. Okay. It's really underwater. And so it makes me wonder, I mean, think about this. Think about this as a business. If every single year you lost 60% of your customers, how would you ever stay in business?
Yeah, it's being a hunter versus a farmer is a horrible existence. It's so much better to nurture those 39% and get it to 60 and 70. And, it's always easier in business, whether it's nonprofit or otherwise, to take care of your current clients versus trying to go out and get a new one.
Herein lies the difficulty. And this is what we're talking about. Most, and when I say most, certainly more than half nonprofits, they might say this because it's unfashionable not to say this nowadays, but they really don't think of their donors as their customers. They think of their donors as that lovely objectified word that I loathe, the F word, funders. Okay. Funders. How does it feel to be a funder, Doug? Does that give you that nice warm feeling?
Yeah, it's like I'm a data point. I'm part of your database. I'm not a member or part of the community. I'm horrible, right? Just money bags. Just an ATM machine for your little nonprofit. Great, thank you very much.
And I do communicate with you periodically, but every single time I communicate with you, I got my hand out.
Asking, right.
And yet, it's common knowledge. The number one negative for donors is being asked too often. Hello. So now let's get to the story piece of that. Okay. So we know that 80% of the money comes from 20% of the donors. We know that any donor of any capacity makes a token gift at first, except in rare circumstances. All right.
Right.
And that to get to those more capacity gifts tends to take 3 or 4 gifts before you get there. So we're looking at 2 to 4 years before you get to a point. And yet there's all this focus on acquisition. Oh, I could bore you for hours on that. And the technologists are helping with that, telling them
Mhm.
you've got to have all these fancy programs for better acquisition. And then you got the AI people who think they can tell you exactly which donor to ask for how much, when, and
Sure.
what clothes to
Mhm.
wear. Okay.
Mhm.
So, but that's beside the point. So everyone's into stories.
Mhm.
The question is, whose story? All right. Okay.
In the for-profit world, I had the same problem. We have the same problem you have, is that people believe that they're Luke Skywalker, right? You're the hero of the story. So let me talk about how cool I am. Let me show you how smart I am. Let me post this content, do this webinar. I'm brilliant. I'm smart. You should hire me. When in actuality, the real purpose of you is to be Yoda, to help the hero, which is your customer. And in your case, nonprofits, that your people who are helping fund this are your customers. The recipients, they'd be the benefactors. I mean, they're not really customers. You're serving them. You're doing good work in the world.
They're the
But my
beneficiaries.
gosh,
They're the beneficiaries.
beneficiaries, right? So yeah, we have the same issue. If people believe that it's all about me, 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 and social media, and this is how great I am, just stop it.
Mm.
Be Yoda. If you got so much brilliance, you don't talk about how great you are. You help a young Jedi become, a man, and that is the story. You've helped that person become, who they're supposed to be, and that's the journey. That's the hero's journey that we should be reframing, both in the profit and nonprofit world, right? It's you want to, yeah. You can talk more about this than I can, but I know enough to say, listen, if these people have a lot of choices and where to park their money, their foundation, their grants. If you don't really deeply understand how they think and feel, you're missing about 61% of the time, apparently. Oh,
How they think
yeah, right.
and you see, sometimes, Doug, I like to say, God save me from nice people. All right. Because they're so well motivated to do good things.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And they forget it's not about them.
Hmm.
It's not even about the good work they're doing. It really isn't.
No.
I mean, and it's about their investors' own sense of self-realization. What is it
Hmm.
they're looking for?
Right.
And before we started this, I said the new blog that's coming out, I think tomorrow, is how can I help?
Hmm.
That's a fundraiser asking a potential investor, how can I help?
Yeah.
See,
Wow. What
and
concept?
and then when you say that, I've been in this business 40 years, Doug, and I've
Hmm.
raised $1 billion either directly or indirectly through the teams
Hmm.
I've administered. And I can tell you, you ask someone that question, wow, what an open door. I've gotten some very interesting answers to that,
Yeah.
and answers I would have never gotten if I'd have been, as some of the people in my business now say, oh, no, we want to be mission forward. In other words, we just come to you and we just lay our mission onto you. I kid you not. I kid you
That's
not.
a monologue, not a dialogue, and
That's
people
right.
don't like being monologued. So yeah, I'm with
So,
you.
so here's what we're
Yeah.
experiencing in my world. There's that middle, what we call the middle range of giving, which would be
Hmm.
anywhere from, say, 50,000 to 250,000, somewhere in that
Hmm.
range. You see, that range is beginning to drop out.
Yeah.
So So what are people saying? Oh my goodness, people aren't generous anymore, and blah blah blah. It's the American middle. It's this, that, and the other. Oh, it's the tax code. It's all this other crap. Okay, no, 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 no. This money, the vast majority of it, is being parked in something called a donor advised fund. You familiar with it?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You told me about that actually.
Okay. It's a DAF, as they say in the business.
Hmm.
Well, these people are daft for not understanding what's going on. But so then you have, the big bad guy who's Fidelity nonprofit,
Yeah.
sucking up all this money. No, they're providing a service for people
Hmm.
who want to do something but don't know what they want to do yet. Okay. So this is a mechanism that they can park this money. That's all it is.
Yeah.
They're not running around looking how they can scoop up money. I mean, come on, give me a break. They're providing a service.
Hmm.
So if nonprofits were providing what the donors are looking for, you would see the money coming their way. All right.
Hmm.
So then the stories that have to be told have to be the donor's story, correct?
Yeah. Absolutely. And appealing to the emotion of those donors is fundamental. I mean, everybody buys an emotion. We validate it with logic. And like you said, they're just putting out there, here's how important this mission is, save the planet, save the whales, whatever it is. That's all fine and good. But remember, these people have choices. They have 100,000 different places they can park this money. So by not understanding their story, their journey, and what's going on in their head and their hearts, you're going to miss the boat more often than you'd like to. So yeah, the story should be about them. And I love the one you told me about the concert.
Oh yeah.
If you shared that before in your podcast, forgive me, but I'd like to hear that again. I think it's a really great example of that bridge between their story and what they're really craving. Like you mentioned the experience thing. I just love that one.
And this is the one about the man that wanted to do the graduate degree program, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, I served a college back east a number of years ago, and they were opening a new arts center, and so there was an opening welcome concert, and there were a number of people invited to this, and some key donors were invited. I was vice president, and I sat at this man's table along with the president, and this man had a 40-year history with the institution.
Yep.
Perfectly capable. The man was a billionaire. All right. Very unassuming, as many billionaires often are.
Mhm.
All right. And his total cumulative giving over the 40-year period had just topped $1 million that year.
Nice.
Well, so the question is, why? He's
Mhm.
capable. And he wasn't like he was stingy or something. He was
Yeah.
very low key, very generous man.
Mhm.
And he says offhand to a faculty member there, I think I'd like to do a graduate degree program here in music. And the faculty member came back after the concert, called me on Monday and said, I met this old guy. He's kind of like funky looking and had these kind of baggy clothes. And this is what he said to me. Was he real? My first reaction is, I know how faculty members can be. I said, were you rude to this man, George?
Yeah.
No, I was not rude to this man.
Good.
Good. I said, he's very real. You need to
Yeah.
understand that. So I called the president and I said, so John told George over the weekend he wanted a graduate degree program. I'd like you to phone him and ask if he was serious or if it was just a whim of the moment. Well, it was serious. The guy was really interested. Well, the irony of this is that the man made his money in the sciences, not in music. He was a scientist. All right. And that kind of perplexed people. Why would he want to do that? Especially when the president really wants a new science building. The president like focus on what they need. All right. So it was a struggle to get the proposal up to a level that I thought made sense, because there again, they were thinking in terms of the money, not what the man wanted to create.
Right.
And you tell my best experiences have been, okay, if someone says I want to create X, all right, well, you draft a proposal that will do that if actualized. And then the price tag attached to that is really kind of inconsequential.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're doing what the donor asked. But so many times it's everyone's focused on the money, the money, the money, the money. Well, it's not about the money. It's people about money. So we get that done. That took a while. And then, at the last minute, the president says, but I really want a science building. I said, John, did you hear Dan? That's not what he said. Okay. Let's, there's plenty of money there. We're only asking for 20 million. The man's got a lot more. Let's just do this first. Oh, okay. Well, he wasn't real happy about that, but we did it anyway. Come to find out why. The man's wife was a longtime music teacher, and he wanted to honor his wife. You see there?
Story.
It's the story. And it could have been very easy for everyone at the college to get caught up in their record and music and all the wonderful things they've done and how much we're going to bring to you and bring to the community. It really wasn't about that at all. No, it was about a man's devotion to his wife.
Sweet. I love it.
And we learned that, because you ask, The other thing we had to figure out was, why was 40 years of giving just topping out at $1 million?
Yeah.
Well, that's because for many years, the CFO at this institution managed it like a mom and pop grocery store. Okay. And so this man's a businessman. He made his fortune in the sciences. You've got to be responsible with money, you see.
Yeah.
And so I asked Bill, I said, so can you tell me? And you see, when you're an intermediary of the president, you're not the president. People will tell you just about anything. Okay.
That's
Because
right. Yeah.
because they really want to send a message, but they don't want to tell him directly, you see.
Hmm.
So I was always the messenger, kind of back and forth, and I had to kind of play
Yeah.
that role. And I was always, I've also been the fixer sometimes too, when something had to be corrected and he had to step in and do X, Y, Z. So anyway,
Uh,
um, John tells me what the problem is. Well, I'm so glad. The reason now is he's hired a professional CFO, and that ding dong that was running it before is gone. Well, the ding dong that was running it before was a personal friend of the president. And although the guy was, I love working for this president, he was loyal to a fault to his friends.
yeah. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
right away, he wanted to defend this man. I said, listen, that is not your job to defend this man. Your job is to simply acknowledge John's feelings about this and move on. You don't have to
Hmm.
say anything else because he will bring it up, and you don't want to take that bait because it will
Hmm.
spear this whole thing off. Well, sure enough, we get in there, and right away at one point it says, "Well, I'm certainly glad you hired a professional, and that the money's
Yep.
being managed well." So
Yep.
I'm like holding my breath. Is he going to take the bait or what? He didn't. He said, well, John, we've hired a bright young man who's very professional,
Hmm.
has some wonderful ideas, and
Yeah.
we're really pleased to have him. Whew. Okay, we passed that test.
Hmm.
And the other test was, of course, figuring out why music,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
science. So they,
Yeah. It's people spend so much time on on themselves and their process. They forget at the end of the day, there's a person, a human being at the end of that chain, whether it's fundraising or selling, whatever it is, that you got to know them better. When we create books for people, we spend a whole month on research. We test a dozen covers with surveys and polls. We do a focus group on a table of contents. We're going to make sure that that cover, and grandma tells us don't judge a book by its cover, but we all do. We got to make sure that cover is going to resonate emotionally with our targeted audience, so they'll actually pause for a second and pick it up and look at the back cover. And if you don't pull that off, then what you write in the middle is irrelevant. It's like a tree that falls in forest and no one's around to hear it. So you've got to understand at a very deep level, as you're describing here, who your audience is and what drives them, what really turns them on. And a lot of people avoid it because it's sometimes uncomfortable conversations about, bad money management, or whatever it is. But, get a third party, whatever, but find out who's invested with you. And if you're really bold, go survey the people that didn't or that dropped off and find out what changed. I mean, no problem, no pressure. I'm just curious what changed in the world or your life, whatever, that you chose to not donate this year.
mhm.
And having someone else ask those hard questions in a very inoffensive manner can give you more marketing power than all the ads in the world. Just knowing why someone did or did not contribute.
or or I may say all the AI predictive statistics in the world.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just thinking about in my own background. I've run into situations where things have changed, and of
Hmm.
course, I was dealing at the presidential level, and we're talking about person-to-person relationships.
Sure.
There was one with a banker that he had remarried after he was widowed,
Hmm.
and she was a widow, and then that was fine, and then suddenly, well, like within sort of abruptly, um, you know, Carl just wasn't available anymore for the president to meet with him.
Yeah.
And he used to make his trip down. They had a lovely condo on the beach in Naples. Not a bad
Hmm.
thing. 21 story, not, you get the picture. Okay,
Of
beautiful,
course.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So anyway, and I said, well, I'll find out what's going on. So I
Hmm.
called Carl's business manager. I said, what is going on? You want to
Hmm.
know? I said, yeah, I want to know. Well, apparently, the second wife had a son who was enrolled in their adult education degree program, and there'd been some bookkeeping or administrative kerfuffle. All right,
Ooh,
all right,
that's a big challenge, but
and and that it didn't feel like he got a fair shake or something. And it's administered on a separate campus, and so it's not like right there, but still. So I said, so what does the president need to do? And he said, oh, he just has to acknowledge it and fix it. I said, so he doesn't have to fall on the sword? No, just acknowledge it and fix it.
yeah.
Great. So I went back. I told my boss, "Oh, okay, fine." So he fixes it, And then we arranged for a luncheon with the couple at their summer home in North Carolina, Western North Carolina, in a golfing community. Now, you know, and I know that people of means are very good at concealing what they're really thinking. They have to be. All right.
Yes.
They have to. They just think this. Okay. And the man's wife was, let's just say, she was a very refined Sally Social. Okay. She knew how to navigate any kind of social situation.
Yeah.
So here we are at lunch. She's seated across from me. President's to my left. Carl, the banker, is to my right. And then at some point, the president brings it up and says, "This has come to our attention. And I just want to let you know that we've corrected this and we've remediated it. And I just want to let you know that I'm personally regret this ever happening." Well, I watched the wife. I'm looking right at her, and for a split second, her eyes registered what she had heard. But very, very quickly, almost imperceptibly, she went to the, "Oh, Dan, there was nothing at all, nothing at all, nothing at all." Okay.
Yeah.
We get out in the parking lot, and Dan says, "Well, there wasn't anything to that." "Oh, yes, there was. You weren't watching her." Okay.
Yeah.
That little imperceptiveness there. And then after that, everything was just hunky-dory.
Yep.
But you have to ask. And you have to
and not be afraid of the answer, by the way.
Yeah, not be afraid of the answer.
It's like, okay.
Well, we were dealing with a longtime donor who even had a dormitory named after him, for heaven's sake. So this wasn't exactly, someone who'd written a check for $10. All right.
Right.
And so there was a need to somehow ferret this thing. So yeah. So let's talk about storytelling. How, I guess, well, one of the things you said, they don't know what their donors need or want.
Sure.
Principle 4 of the 8 principles, Doug, is learn and plan. Learn who would naturally support you, the kinds of people, their profile, then plan on how to reach out to them. Okay? Not the other way around. Or just, as many organizations are wont to do, just use like buckshot against a barn and see what goes through. Okay.
Right.
Let's talk to me about, if you were telling someone how to construct a story that's about the person they're speaking to, either directly or indirectly, rather than themselves, what process would you use?
The process I use, actually, we're doing it for a lot of our clients to help them with their, with their outreach or speaking gigs or talking to media. And it reflects really clearly on what everybody else is doing. We're doing the opposite, right? Everyone's talking about content and video and webinars and funnels and do all this stuff, all this marketing jazz out there by telling people how great you are, right? And you want to get more content, more traffic to get attention, because they say it's an attention economy. And my contention is it's always been and will continue to be a relationship economy. And the best way to build a relationship is not to talk about yourself, but to put the spotlight on others. So if I'm going to go start a nonprofit and target 1,000 different potential donors, I would do what I do with my clients for any of our processes, which is to build that database, follow them on LinkedIn or where they're posting articles or content, wherever they're doing, get to know them, like you mentioned. I want to understand who they are, and then celebrate it. We do a lot of liking and sharing of other people's content. And when you do that strategically, not in a stalkish manner, but authentically over many months, you have beginnings of a relationship. The next thing that we do, that I would suggest anybody do, is to go to their content, and we do what's called a micro conversation, where we'll look at someone's article on LinkedIn, for example, and we have a human being read it, right? And they'll do 3 things. We call it XYZ of a micro conversation. Number 1, we compliment them. "Hey, great article. I really enjoyed this because I learned that," right? So it gives them a little endorphin hit of the acknowledgement that they spent all this time on this content and somebody actually liked it. And they actually read it because they commented intelligently of what they learned from it. And the third piece of this is just like 2 or 3 sentences, is to ask them an intelligent question, saying, "Wow, I really learned about this one area here. How would you apply it to this area over here?" And we ask an intelligent question, they go, wow, that's a great question, right? You can say you're going to get a compliment back to you for asking a good question. And they're always 100% of the time, they're going to answer it because they put all this time and effort, energy, and resources into building their content stream. When you read it, acknowledge it, and intelligently comment on it, they're going to answer. And the very next thing they do is they look and say, who asked this question? They click on your profile, and now they're coming to you going, wow, that's a good question. Who is this guy?
Mhm.
And we, again, do that systematically over a couple more months. You're developing the beginnings of a relationship by liking, sharing, intelligently commenting on somebody else's content, putting the spotlight on them.
Mhm.
And once you've done that enough for, like I said, 3 or 4 months, you have the permission basically to then send them a direct message. And again, I'm doing this with a guy raising some capital for a fund right now. We're not pitching them on the message. We're saying, hey, I'm working on a white paper, a report, an article, a book. Love to get your opinion on this. Now, here's where the magic comes in. Number one, they're going to say, sure, I'll be happy to give you 10 minutes of my time. You've been commenting on my stuff for 4 months. You've been a fan. I appreciate you. Send me what you got. What we send them is something that we know based on those 4 months of relationship building. We know that the content we're going to present to them is not a sales piece. It's something we're working on. I need their opinion on it, but it's in direct alignment with their values or what they do. And so they're going to be enthused. Like, oh, wow, this is a great article, man. How'd you know this about me? You know, it's like, well, we've been following you for 4 months, so we got a feel for it. And everyone loves to give their opinion. So you ask them their opinion on this report that I'm writing. What do you think about? What would you change? What's your opinion on it? So now you start a conversation, and it's a dialogue. So you got a relationship you're building. And when I do this on LinkedIn, which I spend more time than anywhere else, 8 out of 10 of my conversations have nothing to do with my business. Don't care. I've had relationships with Hollywood producers, with data scientists at Intel, with a lot of really interesting people, not for the point of me trying to sell my stuff, but just for the relationship itself. And my referrals, and we get plenty of referrals for our company, half of our referrals come in from people who are not our clients, people who I've had conversations with, who
Let's
get
pause.
along well, and boom.
I want to hear that again. Half of your referrals
Mhm.
come from persons who are not current or former clients.
Absolutely. Yep.
Let me unpack that for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. Half of your referrals
Mhm.
are coming from individuals who are
Mhm.
not current or past clients.
Yep.
Why is that? Is that because
Because I appreciate them and I respect them and I demonstrate my respect and likability by liking them and reading their
okay?
stuff and commenting on it.
So these people are not
Mhm.
unknown to you, or you're not unknown to them,
No, no, of
but
course not.
the relationship has come to a point where,
Mhm.
oh, I know Sally over here. She'd really love Duck.
Yeah.
I'm going to put the two of them together.
Yeah.
This is what I tell people when
Mhm.
I talk about building relationships from the inside out. It's
Yep.
building that network, you see.
Yep.
And not
Mhm.
everyone's going to give to your cause. Well, that's great. Okay,
It
fine.
doesn't
But
matter.
they know people who will.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're being authentic with them,
Mhm.
you're not, hitting them up, pushing them into a corner, giving them the guilt
Mhm.
trip, all that kind of stuff.
And being authentic is not caring whether they reciprocate or not.
That's right.
If
That's
you
right.
care and you're only referring or talking to people that you feel or believe can help you, people can smell that a mile away.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm a blatant giver. I don't care. It comes back to me some way or other, or if it doesn't matter because I've created value out into the universe, right? So it's okay. Someone's going to get something out of this. I'll give you a referral, and it comes back, and it doesn't come back. It stays out there, so it's all good.
You know, yes, I couldn't agree more. And I'm always in my own business. I'm always, offering, free advice a little
Mhm.
bit here and there,
Yeah.
pointing people in the right direction.
Mhm.
I do a lot of so-called free stuff, unquote.
Yep.
Um, and yet your impact stays there. It's out there.
Yeah.
You have that kind of impact that
Yep.
resonates. That's out
Mhm.
there. Um, I had I'll tell you a little story, which personally was very meaningful to me.
Mhm.
I was vice president at a liberal arts college, and I was the first professional that had been hired there to do this kind of
Mhm.
thing. So, needless to say, I was kind of doing things that had never been done before, and it was a very kind of closed, kind of insulated community, and I
Mhm.
definitely looked like I had landed from another planet. All right, and but we had some pretty good success actually from my time there, and
Mhm.
as a result, um, I really tried to, while I was there, and I was only there 3 years, to at least begin the idea of them understanding what a philanthropic culture really looked like.
Yeah.
Well, about 3 weeks ago, I had a conversation with the current president, and this is three presidents later, Doug. Okay, he said,
Mhm.
and I never met this man in my life, and I called him for another reason, and he said, I want you to know that your presence is still felt on this campus.
Nice.
Think about that. That I
Amazing.
had left such an impact that the way I
Mhm.
thought I to do certain things was still being revered and celebrated.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
believe me, if you've ever been in higher education, it isn't all milk and honey. I mean,
Right.
the faculty are merciless. All right, they're like they got their own agendas, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of like this all the time.
Yeah, sure.
So, but for that aura to still be there after 20 years plus,
Mhm.
that made me feel like I've done something worthwhile, Doug.
Everyone's everyone's favorite movie. It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart, right? I mean, we all love this movie. How many people embody that as a way to live their life?
Not many.
Well, maybe they're yearning to be like that. Well, just go and do it. Doesn't take any energy to be a giver and to be kind and to serve others and not care about yourself because you're fine. You're not gonna. I don't know. It's pretty simple to me.
Well, unfortunately, more often than not, the person who's celebrated is the Lionel Barrymore character, Mr. Potter.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but that's because that's the whole go back to our Olympic brain, and we're always looking for things to be afraid of versus they started a good news channel years ago and didn't take off because nobody watched it. If it bleeds, it leads. That's the way we perceive things.
It is. So, so if you tell me about your own business for a minute,
Sure.
I know there are going to be people that see this that might be interested in you. All
Yeah.
right. Um, we've talked about it. How would you work, say, with a nonprofit? How would you do that? I mean, in terms of maybe restructuring their stories or maybe
Mhm.
having
Right.
write an example book. How could you do that?
I would take the approach of more of a brand marketing thing first. A book may not be there. I really want to focus on, where they are today, where they'd like to be, and what that gap is. It's usually fundraising, but it could be other things. It could be just repositioning. But when we take a deep dive into that process, if we determine they do need a book, then yeah, we're gonna get deep into the psychology of their target readers, right? Future members. I think I'll call them donors. We have the better name for it, right? Future
Invest.
clients who are
I call them investors.
investors, right? We want to get in. We do some research on where they are, what their choices are, what really drives them, and probably create some storylines around that. And it might to do with legacy and impact is a big thing for a lot of our CEO and founder clients. They don't need to publish a book. They don't need new business. They're getting ready to sell or exit. So why are they doing a book? It's always legacy. I want my grandkids to know who I am. And the same thing is probably true for a lot of your investors. They've done a lot. They've built wealth. They got to, leave their mark on the world somehow. And interestingly, every other piece of marketing out there, from social media, advertising, speaking, events, everything is temporary except a book. A book is permanent. A
Um,
book nobody throws away. We throw away brochures left and right, business cards, circular file. But a
mhm.
book, we never, I mean, it's like burning them. You never throw away a book.
No, no.
So publishing a book for a nonprofit can be a wonderful long-term digital asset that they can use for getting new investors. They can reward current investors. I would feature my key ones in the book to shine the light on them and talk about the good they're doing. I make it all about the investors for sure, with the
Them.
undertone of the nonprofit, but the investors would be the key principal, the hero of the story, of course. Yeah.
the XYZ story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The couple of things you raised in there I want to bring attention to. First of all, the idea of a book being permanent.
Yes.
I think it's Benjamin Franklin said that if you want to be remembered 5 minutes after you're dead, you must write a book.
That's a good one. I have to remember that one.
And that's well, I'll have to get my Bartlett's out here to see if it's in. That's my. I still do paper and this kind of thing, but I'm sure it's on the net somewhere.
Yeah.
Trouble is, um, you can't always verify the source or what's really there.
Yeah, it
But
gets worse. Yeah.
and the other thing is about the fact that it's their story.
Mm-hmm.
What was I going to say about this? I can't. For those of us that are you're just listening, you can't see my hands, but I've talked about donors being investors.
Mm-hmm.
They're investing in their own self-fulfillment.
100%. Mm-hmm.
They're using the organization as a conduit.
Yeah.
They're using it to facilitate that.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they're doing. And
Right.
the organization's job is to collect those individuals whose dreams of getting self-fulfillment align somehow with the organization. So then it's the organization's job to demonstrate to these individuals that they will be able to do that by investing. And so then instead of I have a nonprofit, I've got a worthy mission, I go out here to get money to apply to my mission, which is the conventional way of doing it, even in the relational way of doing it. Instead is I'm doing good for the community, but there are these guys out here that I know if they were a part of this, they would find so much fulfillment in that. So I approach them on that basis. So then it becomes two parties coming together to accomplish something that neither can do alone.
Ah, beautiful. I
That's
love
what
that.
it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then we call it the triple win, actually, and that's
Mhm.
our brand name for it. But
Yeah.
what it is it's the donors and the nonprofit
Mm-hmm.
ultimate benefit in the community. So
Yep.
everyone wins. It's a
Yeah.
triple win, you see. But guess what? They all win for a different reason.
That's right. That's right.
It's not the same reason. And
Yeah.
so when I get things like I got the other day, we talked about this. I don't unsubscribe from much of my email, so I get lots of stuff. But I'm just looking and see what's out there, what's going
Right.
on out there. And
Mm-hmm.
there was this webinar coming up, and from a respected source talking about storytelling and how to do that and how to show impact. Well,
Yeah.
whose impact? So this person's approach was we're going to show you how to use metrics and communication to show what a good job you're doing and how you're changing the world, which will inevitably convince people to give money to you. Well, no, not really. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe at some small level, but that's
Right.
it. But this is the conventional thinking out there. This is what you see. And so you're suggesting is totally upside down, inside out,
Yes.
which
Put the spotlight on them, not on you, because everyone's favorite word in the English language is their own name. Dale Carnegie 101. So just go back to that book and love on people and serve them, and you're going to do just fine with that. If you just take the spotlight off yourself and put it on others, that's the basic.
and that is so hard to do for a lot of nonprofit people because
Yeah.
they're doing such good work. And Doug, I
Yeah.
like to say, God save me from nice people. All right. And I don't mean to be flip about that, but
Yeah, it's okay. It's all right.
it's that you really have to get over yourself to be
Right.
it can't really be about you.
Yeah, I talked to another consultant in your field, and he said, "Yeah, they treat it like it's not a business. This is because it's nonprofit doesn't mean it's not a business. there's still revenue and expenses. It's a business. The word nonprofit thinks that they're supposed to all be broke and not doing anything. Like, no, you're supposed to actually, work anyway.
Well, a nonprofit is not even a business model. It's a tax status. All right.
That's right. That's true. Yeah.
That's all it is. So
Yeah.
the only difference is between you and a for-profit business is how excess income is distributed.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
You still got to pay everybody that works there.
Yeah.
You still got to pay your suppliers. They don't give it to you for free, although a lot of nonprofits want it.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
But business, you see. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, we could go on forever. But
yes, I got another call to get to myself. That's okay, Larry. I appreciate time. It's good.
But thank you. So let me we've been listening to Doug Crowe, And he's been delighting us today on how to build stories that make meaning to other people.
Mhm.
If someone wanted to get in touch with you, Doug, how would they do that?
I've got one couple things. The first thing is you can go to authorbrand.com/go, and I can give people a complimentary assessment on their idea and give them some brainstorming tips and spend some time with them. Authorbrand.com/go, or you can just drop me an email, Doug@DougCrowe.com, and just put the 8 principles or Larry Johnson in the subject line, so I know it came from you,
All
and I'd
right.
be happy to have a conversation.
And Crowe is spelled Crowe.
Correct. Yep. Yep.
Well, everyone, it's been delightful. Listen again next week for another leader in the field. And until then,